Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Jaded Blossom's November release is now available and it's all about coffee and tea. Here's a quick look at all of the items in the November release. I'll go through each of them so you can get a closer look. The first item is Latte Birthday Wishes. Currently, this stamp set is not available for individual purchase. It's the freebie you'll receive if you purchase at least $50 worth of product, and one item has to be from the new release. This is while supplies last and for a limited time. There's a new stencil set this month. This is Coffee Mug Stencil. There are two pieces. One will add the straws and the little hearts. The other will add the steam, the mugs, and the coffee beans. There's a new Build-A-Booth set. This is Coffee Add On. There are 3 new bunting pieces you can use to decorate your booth. One has mugs, another has coffee beans, and the last one has the to-go coffee or tea cup. There's also a bag of coffee beans, a mug, and a teeny tiny little heart. The next die set is an add-on for the gnomes. This is Coffee Add Ons. This is a really fun set. It includes the large mug, and it's cut open at the top so you can have a gnome peeking out of the mug. Super cute. I'll pull the dies out of the bag so you can get an idea of the actual size. The fun thing about the mug, you could use it without the gnomes. Just think of all the fun items you could tuck inside. The new hat is whipped cream, and it even has the little straw. There's a new coffee balloon, several different coffee cups for the gnomes to hold, and even a large coffee bean. The next item is a sentiment stamp set. This is called Coffee Shop. Most of the sentiments are designed to fit on the sign for the Build-A-Booth dies, and some of them will work for the add-on sign set. There's a really fun variety of sentiments, even a couple that are holiday themed. There's pumpkin spice and everything nice, and also 'tis the season for peppermint mochas. There's another stamp set, and this one has coordinating outline dies. It's called Thanks a Latte Gnomie. Lots of really fun sentiments. Jaded Blossom always has great fonts. And there are some sentiments on this set that aren't specifically coffee themed. There's Breakfast with My Gnomies, For My Tea-rific Gnomie, I'm Sorry I Flaked, Happy Belated Birthday, and then there are the coffee themed sentiments. The final item that's included in the November release is another gnome die add-on set. This is Tea Add-Ons. If you're not a coffee fan, there is a tea set. There's the teapot, the tea kettle, a large tea bag, the small teacup with the saucer, a whole lemon, and also the sliced lemon. I'll pull the dies out of the package so you can get a better idea of the size. I always enjoy the faux stitch detail on Jaded Blossom's dies, and they don't miss out on any of the little details. So that's everything that's included in the November release, and if you are interested, I do have links provided in the description box below. I have a few cards to share with you using the new release. The pattern paper I'll be using for most of the cards is from Newton's Nook Designs. This is Coffee House Stories. Let's go ahead and get started with card design number 1. I will be using some card sketches for inspiration. The first sketch is from Cards TV. This is sketch number 28. And if you are interested in any of the sketches I use in this video, I share all of that information on my coordinating blog post. That link is provided in the description box below, or you can simply head over to KristieMarcotte.com. This paper pad is super cute. There's lots of cat and dog images with coffee cups and books. For the background of my card, I have a grayish brown with white hearts, layering it on some dark brown cardstock. For the smaller rectangle, I selected the paper with the sweet little cats with the coffee cups. Layered that piece with the same dark brown cardstock. For the narrow strip that goes across the card, using more of that dark brown cardstock, this card is featuring the freebie sentiment set, sending you a Latte birthday wishes. I cut it out using a stitch circle die, then layered it on a slightly larger purple circle die cut. Before adhering it to the card, I'll add a scrap cardstock piece above and below where it goes over that brown strip. The brown cardstock is really thick, so I didn't want to have a noticeable dip by adding the sentiment without those cardstock layers. Now I'll add a couple of the die cut images. One of the to-go coffee cups and also a couple of coffee beans. For most of Jaded Blossom's die cut images, when there's lots of little pieces to assemble, they have the base piece. I usually use white cardstock for that piece. Then I'll add all the individual die cut pieces. You generally won't see that background piece, so you can use any cardstock color. I put the 2 individual coffee beans above the sentiment on the left side. The small coffee bean I adhered on the front of the coffee cup, and I'm adding the coffee cup in the lower right hand corner. Part of it will be sitting on the circle die cut, but most of it is hanging off, so I am adding some foam dimension, trying to keep it nice and level. For embellishments, I'm using some of Doodlebug shape sprinkles, a couple of yellow hearts. The yellow is almost the same color as the cute little cats. I'll put one on both sides of the sentiment. Then for a final finishing touch, I'll use a white gel pen and add a few highlights to the coffee cup. I also added this scrap piece of pattern paper on the inside of the card, just for some extra detail. Now moving on to card design number 2. I selected 2 pattern papers. This is actually the same pattern paper, just the front and back side. I cut them at an angle. I'll layer both of them on some dark green cardstock. For separation between the 2 pattern papers, I cut out a wavy border. This is from Jaded Blossom's border die sets, still one of my favorites of theirs. I put double-sided adhesive tape on the back, adhered it on top, and it is longer than the card panel, so I simply flipped it over, used my scissors, and trimmed off the extra. Next, I'll add a stitched oval die cut and also a scallop die cut. Both of these are from Jaded Blossom. I use white shimmer cardstock for the oval and vellum for the scallop oval. This card will be featuring the new mug. I cut it out from some light green cardstock, and this color matches the light green on the pattern paper. So I want to add a little extra green to the edge of the mug so it stands out against the pattern paper. The ink color is Seafoam by Catherine Pooler. I will be adding one of the gnomes inside the mug. I've already assembled most of the boy gnome. You'll notice I didn't add his feet, and I'm actually cutting off the little feet stubs. They won't be visible once you tuck the gnome inside the mug. Using some of the pattern paper, I cut the band to add to the hat. Now I'll tuck the gnome inside the mug. I'll add a couple of double-sided adhesive tape pieces on the back side to secure the gnome inside the mug, but I'll also be popping it up with some foam dimension. I'm using thin foam dimension from scrapbook.com. This is their 1 millimeter thickness. I'll make sure to get good coverage on the back of the mug, the gnome, and I won't forget the handle. I do need to cut some small pieces to fit behind the handle. I'll remove the release paper, then add my mug on the front of my card, and I will need to put it fairly low so the tip of his hat doesn't go off the edge of the card. I have the rest of the die cut pieces I'll be adding on my card in a sort and stack tray from scrapbook.com. These are so handy for keeping all your little die cut pieces and embellishments organized. I'll put glue on the back of his hands and add them to the edge of the mug. For a sentiment, I've already stamped and cut this out. Instant gnome, just add coffee. I think that's a really cute sentiment. I did pop it up with some foam dimension, and I'll adhere it on the front of the mug. I also cut out 3 of the individual coffee beans, and I'll adhere them underneath the sentiment on the mug. To help get them evenly spaced, I'll first adhere the coffee bean in the center, then add one on the right and the final one on the left. Using a white gel pen, I'll add a few highlights to the gnome, his hat, and also the mug. For embellishments, I'm using some sequins from Pretty Pink Posh. This is their matte gold confetti mix. There's, I think, 3 or 4 different sizes in this mix. I like them since they don't have a hole in the center and they're very flat, so they don't add a lot of dimension. I poured a small amount of the sequins in a small wooden bowl. Sequins tend to be very staticky, but I find that using a wooden bowl, I don't have that static problem versus using a plastic bowl. And the wooden bowl is custom made by my father. I am using an embellishment wand to pick them up, adding just a small dot of Barely Art glue, then pressing them in place. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. For the second card, the pattern papers are reversed. For card design number 3, I'm using Jaded Blossom's Sunburst Card Mat die. I cut out the frame from some dark brown cardstock, flipped it over, and I'm adding some double-sided adhesive tape on the back side. I put 2 rows of, I think it's 1.5 inches, and also a 1-inch strip in the very center. Then I'll flip it over. I used the same die with 2 different pattern papers. One is white on the background with some green coffee or teacups, and the other is a tone-on-tone green polka dot. I'm inlaying all of the pieces, alternating the different patterns. All of the openings are different sizes, so it's really easy to inlay all the pieces inside the frame. At the very bottom, I am adding 2 of the same pattern papers next to each other. Since there are 15 openings, not able to alternate it all the way around. But I think by adding those same pieces at the bottom, it's not very noticeable. I did use my scissors to trim off the extra double-sided adhesive tape that was at the bottom of the frame. Then I'll remove the release paper, add glue in the areas where I don't have the tape, and I'll layer this piece on the same dark brown cardstock. Put ATG tape on the back and add my card front onto a card base, leaving 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. I've already assembled most of my little girl gnome, and I do have foam dimension on the back. I'll adhere her on a stitched oval die cut, and I cut this out of vellum. I'll flip over the oval die cut, put glue on the back just behind the gnome, then adhere it in the lower right-hand corner. I still want to be able to see the pattern paper in the background, but I also want some separation from the busy background so my gnome stands out. The gnome will be holding a teacup on a saucer. I use white cardstock for the background piece that has the saucer and also the teacup. The plate and saucer are the same cardstock color as her hat, and I use some white pearlescent cardstock for the teacup. I cut out a second teacup from some white cardstock and trimmed off the very bottom. With the extra 2 layers from the saucer and the plate, I wanted to make sure the teacup stayed at the same level. Then I'll adhere the skinny little piece to put the tea inside the teacup, and there's also a tea bag and the string. I used some yellow polka dot paper for the tea bag. Can't really see the polka dot since it is a teeny tiny piece. Next, I'll add her hands on the right and left side of the teacup. I'm just putting glue behind her fingers. I tucked the one hand underneath the tea bag and put the other hand on the handle of the teacup. Then I'll flip over this piece, put foam dimension on the back, and I did put some slightly thicker foam dimension behind her hands and thin foam dimension behind the teacup. I'll remove the release paper and adhere the teacup in front of the little girl gnome. For a sentiment, I've already stamped and cut out for my Tea-rific Gnomie. Using the same outline die, I cut out a second piece from some light tan pearlescent cardstock. I layered the 2 pieces together to create a drop shadow underneath the sentiment. For embellishments, I'm adding some Espresso Jewels from Pretty Pink Posh. Put 3 of them around the gnome image. I also added a little white flower on her hat, and this is one Doodlebug Designs Shape Sprinkles. For final finishing touch, I use a white gel pen to add highlights to the gnome and also the teacup. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. The second card is basically the same. The inlaid die cut pieces on the background are opposite from the first card. Now moving on to card design number 4. Selected this fun purple heart pattern paper for the background. I'm adding a couple of Love from Lizzie peel-offs toward the bottom of the panel. This is the purple mirror color in the pinstripe style. I used the widest and also the medium width. Now you'll only see a tiny bit of the peel-offs. I could have used more of the small scraps, but sometimes I like to use the longer pieces to make sure I get them nice and straight. I wrapped the ends around the back, layered this piece on some dark purple cardstock. Then I'll add my card front onto a card base, leaving 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. Next, I'll add a large Octagon die cut. I used some light purple cardstock. This card will be featuring another mug with a gnome inside. I cut out the mug from the same dark purple cardstock I used for the background layer. I have part of my gnome assembled. She'll be wearing the new whipped cream hat with a yellow straw. I use white cardstock for the background piece of the hat, white shimmer cardstock for the whipped cream, and light yellow cardstock for the straw. Once the hat is all assembled, I'll add the hat onto the gnome, and I will need to trim off the very tip of that traditional gnome hat in order to fit the new whipped cream hat. Then I'll add the gnome's nose, and I did pop it up with some foam dimension. This gnome has red hair with braids. I'll adhere the braids using some glue. And I am adding some cute little bows at the end of the braids. I used some purple glitter paper. If you weren't aware, Jaded Blossom has 2 extra part die sets, so you can cut out multiples of the hands, the nose, the hair, the bows, lots of different pieces. It'll save you so much die cutting time if you make a lot of gnomes. Once I have my little girl gnome all assembled, I tucked her into the mug, and I'll secure her on the back side with some double-sided adhesive tape. Off screen, I did add some foam dimension, remove the release paper, and I'll add the mug with the gnome inside on the front of my card. I think she looks so cute with the whipped cream on her head and the straw on top. To decorate the mug, I'm adding the smaller sunflower, and this is from Jaded Blossom's new sunflower die set. It was released last month as part of a mini release. After assembling the sunflower, I did pop it up with some foam dimension. For a sentiment, I've already stamped and cut this out. Thanks a Latte Gnomie. I'll adhere it in the upper left-hand corner. Before adhering it down, I did put a scrap cardstock piece on the right side, just in the area where it goes off of the Octagon die cut piece. Next, I'll glue both of her hands so she's holding the edge of the mug. Using a white gel pen, I'll add a few highlights to the gnome, the straw, and also the mug. And I thought it would be fun to add a little bit of sparkle to the center of the sunflower. I'm using Scrapbook.com's brown glitter brush. For a final finishing touch, I'm adding a few glitter enamel dots. These are from Pink and Main. Put 3 of them around the image. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. This is one of my favorite cards. I love the bold look of the sunflower on the front of the mug and the sweet little gnome peeking out of the mug. For card design number 5, I'm using the new coffee mug stencil set. Starting with the mugs, it has the steam and the coffee beans. The ink color is from Catherine Pooler. This is Sandcastle. I have my mini stencil mat from Waffle Flower, piece of white cardstock, and I taped the stencil down using some of Scrapbook.com's mint tape. Once I finish the first stencil layer, I'll switch it out for the second layer that has the hearts and also the straws. The ink color is also from Catherine Pooler. This is Daydream. Really pretty teal blue color. Once I finish with that stencil layer, I'll remove the stencil, and there's the finished look. This is such a cute design. Now I'll trim down this panel to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. Toward the bottom of this panel, I'm adding a couple of stitch strip die cut pieces. These are from Jaded Blossom's border die set. And I did put double-sided adhesive tape on the back of the border pieces. They're cut longer than the panel. I'll adhere them in place, flip over this panel, use my scissors, and trim off the extra. Then I'll layer this piece on some brown cardstock, then again on the same teal cardstock. Put ATG tape on the back and add my card front onto a card base. I would say this is the only card that doesn't feature any pattern paper, but I did use pattern paper for the gnome's hat and also her dress. Next, I'll add a large stitch circle die cut. Use some light blue cardstock. Just adhere that in place with some glue. I've already assembled my little girl gnome. She's got a cute pink hat and pink dress and of course pink bows in her hair. And also one pink bow on her hat. Next to the gnome will be a bag of coffee beans. I mentioned earlier in the video that generally I use white cardstock for that background piece when I'm building the different die cut images. But for the bag of coffee beans, I decided to use this same light brown color for that background piece. Then I cut out all the different layers of the bag. For the coffee beans, I used some dark brown cardstock. And I also cut out 2 of the individual beans. I think it adds a little extra detail. Now I'll add the bag of coffee beans on the right side of the card and it'll sit next to the gnome. I already have foam dimension on the back of the gnome. I'll remove the release paper. I did leave off foam dimension on her right foot. I guess technically it would be the left foot because the foot will overlap the bag of coffee beans. I've already stamped and cut out the sentiment, "Been thinking about you, Gnomie." And I used some of the teal cardstock for the drop shadow. The gnome will be holding one of the large coffee beans. And this is a jumbo size coffee bean. I used the same dark brown cardstock for the background piece of the large coffee bean and the 2 layers for the front of the coffee bean. Then I'll add her hands on the right and left side of the coffee bean. We'll put glue on the back of the coffee bean, some foam dimension behind her hands, and add the coffee bean in front of the little girl gnome. Using a small scrap piece of brown cardstock, I'll cut a small banner and adhere it in the upper left-hand corner. I'll first cut a fishtail on the bottom, cut the right side in slightly at an angle, flip it over, and do the same thing on the other side. This is my little whimsical banner. Then I'll adhere it in place with some glue. For embellishments, I'm using more of Pretty Pink Posh's Espresso Jewels. I'll put 3 around the sentiment and 2 in the lower left-hand corner. Using an embellishment wand to pick them up, adding just that small drop of Barely Art glue, then pressing them in place. Then for a final finishing touch, I'll use a white gel pen and add highlights to the gnome, the coffee bean, and also the bag. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. This is another fun card. I really like the design of the stencil. For card design number 6, I'm using a card sketch for inspiration. This is from Sugar Pea Designs. It's Sugar Sketch number 38. And I'm really not following this sketch closely, just using it for the basic design. I selected 2 pattern papers for the background. I have more of the brown with white hearts and also some of the tone-on-tone coffee bean design. For the heart paper, I really only need 2 narrow strips since most of it will be covered up with the wider panel of coffee beans. I'm layering everything on some dark brown cardstock. I've already stamped out the sentiment, "'Tis the season for peppermint mochas." I'll layer that piece on some of the tone-on-tone brown stripe pattern paper, then layer it again on the same dark brown cardstock. Before adhering the sentiment strip, I'll add some scrap cardstock and scrap pattern paper pieces on the right and left side. That way everything stays nice and level. I mentioned earlier this brown cardstock is super thick. I'm not sure of the brand, it's just something I had on hand. I'll be adding some fun peppermint candies to my card. I use Jaded Blossoms Peppermint Candy die set and also the Gnome Dies gingerbread add-on set. For the larger peppermint candies, I cut out the wrapper from vellum. I use white shimmer cardstock for the white area of the candy and pink cardstock for the swirl section. Just adhere all three pieces together. For the smaller peppermint candies, I use the same pink cardstock and some white shimmer cardstock. I have foam dimension on the back of the larger peppermint candies, and I'll add all three of those toward the top of the card. And I decided to not put them all in a row as indicated on the card sketch. I put the small peppermint candies on the right and left side of the sentiment. And I also cut out 2 of the coffee beans. I'll put foam dimension on the back of the 2 coffee beans and adhere them underneath the sentiment on the right side. I'm using 2 different thicknesses of foam dimension since the coffee beans will slightly overlap each other. For a final finishing touch, I'm using a white gel pen, adding highlights to the 3 large peppermint candies and also the 2 coffee beans at the bottom of the card. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using this design. When I was making this card, I kept debating if I wanted to add one of the coffee cups since it does have the sentiment peppermint mochas, but I think having all the peppermint candy and the coffee beans in the background, it still works without the coffee cup. Now here's another look at the 12 cards I made using Jaded Blossom's brand new November 2023 release. It's all about coffee and tea. If you are interested in any of the products I used in this video, I do have links provided in the description box below. If there's a product I used that I didn't list, you can always head over to my blog. YouTube does have a limit on how many characters we can add in the description box, but I have everything pictured over on my coordinating blog post. I do use affiliate links when possible. When you purchase an item using my links, I will earn a small commission at no additional cost to you, and this is a great way to help support my channel. And don't forget to give my video a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.